Anti-Israel, anti-America demonstrations have taken over college campuses. It is absolute chaos, but brave students are standing up and pushing back against them. Also, we're seeing bravery even among middle school girls who are pushing back against another destructive ideology, and that is gender ideology. So we have got some profiles and courage on today's episode of Relatable. It's brought to you by our friends at Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com. Use code Allie at checkout. That's goodranchers.com, code Allie. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Wednesday. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. All right, we've got to talk about what's going on college campuses, y'all. It's wild. It's wild. I have just been allowing all of this to build before we've delved into it ourselves. There's so much to discuss. I'm not going to get into every single angle of this because there are so many different nooks and crannies and facets of it that we just don't even have time to thoroughly analyze on one episode, but it'll probably be an ongoing story that we'll discuss. This is probably going to be something that's discussed for years to come. Before we get into it, just a reminder of a couple things. One, we've got really cute merch in my mom era, alliemerch.com. You can go check that out. We got matching onesies. Also got behind the paywall subscriber exclusive content that's out that you will love. blazetv.com/Allie. Use code Allie to subscribe for $20 off. And as I have been teasing for a few weeks now, we've got a really, really exciting announcement coming up in probably 2 weeks. And I am not exaggerating when I say that it is the biggest announcement in Relatable's history. Okay, it's not about merchandise. It's not about anything that we have ever done before. In our almost 1,000 episode history. We started in 2018. Can you believe that? That's wild. It's been 6 years. It was 6 years in March since we started Relatable. And we have never done anything like this. We've never announced anything like this. I am so excited. That's in a couple of weeks. So just get ready. Just get ready. Speaking of 1,000 episodes, though, we will be at 1,000 episodes. Bree, is it next week? Next week? What? 1,000 episodes of Relatable? Okay, I'm not going to get too sentimental right now. I'll save that for next week's episode. For now, let's get past all the announcements. We got that. I think that's all I had to say. I feel like I had something else to say. I'm forgetting what I was going to say. So we'll just go into this first story, which is that there are anti-Israel protests taking over college campuses, spreading anti-Semitism just outright. Okay, we don't have to nuance that or caveat that. I don't need to explain how criticism of some Israeli actions or policies is not synonymous with anti-Semitism. We know that. We're a critically thinking bunch. What we're seeing on college campuses right now, this absolute degenerate chaos, is anti-Semitism. Just outright, blatant Jew hatred. In the name of liberation, in the name of equality, in the name of freedom, just the worst derelicts that you have ever seen in human history are encamping Ivy League campuses right now because they are fighting for the liberation and the freedom of Palestine. Crazy. Okay. Let me give you a summary. This is from theblaze.com. We've also gotten some details from NBC News. So, pro-Palestinian protesters have taken over college campuses across America, from Columbia University in New York to George Washington University in D.C. and Cal Poly Humboldt in California. The protest began when students took over Columbia University's Morningside Heights campus lawn on April 17th, following Columbia President Namat Shafiq testifying before Congress about anti-Semitism on campus. The protests have now expanded nationwide. So we're seeing at UCLA, several campuses across the country, the same kinds of things are happening. We are seeing these students dressed in Muslim garb, protesting against Israel, apparently. and protesting against the Biden administration's support of Israel, protesting against what they would call genocide in Gaza, unfair, unjust treatment of the Muslim population in Palestine, what they would erroneously call a genocide happening at the hands of the Israeli government and military. That's what they say they are standing up against. They are standing for the dignity of the oppressed people of Palestine. So the protesters have spent the last week setting up autonomous zones in solidarity with Gaza. You might remember that phrase, autonomous zone, from that horrid year of 2020. Remember the summer of 2020 after George Floyd died and several of these Antifa, so-called anti-fascist left-wing radical groups, they set up autonomous zones in places like Seattle, in places like Portland, in these just left-wing enclaves. And basically what they declared is that in our autonomous zone, we don't have to abide by your laws. We don't abide by state rules and regulations. Police officers are not allowed in some cases, emergency aid wasn't even allowed in. There was a young man, Antonio Mays, who died at one of these places. I mean, just absolutely wretched hubs of smelly communists and violent activists in these places. And of course, it ended up disbanding because these people are completely incapable of building anything. Progressivism in general is. Progressivism as an ideology only destroys. That's why it's actually so effective. It only takes down. It only tears down. It can't actually build anything. It is only against things. They say they're for certain things, but they're vapid euphemisms. They're for equality. They're for liberation. They're for freedom. They're for whatever they say that they're for equity, they're for progress, but these don't have concrete meanings. What they really mean is that we are against the family, we are against God, we are against truth, we are against right and wrong. And that is an effective way to kill something, to ruin something, to bring a civilization to rubble. It is not material that is that has the ability to be used to build something. It's just not useful in that way. So that's what we are seeing made manifest again today on college campuses. The same thing that we saw in the so-called revolution of 2020, we are now seeing on college campuses. It just has a different flavor. Now it has a Palestine v. Israel flavor. So they've got these autonomous zones in solidarity with Gaza, holding Islamic prayer sessions and chanting about the Intifada. So the Intifada, it apparently literally means to shake off, but it typically refers to some kind of uprising. Now, some people might say it's a non-violent uprising, but throughout history, Muslims have had several violent intifadas, violent armed uprising. And there's actually this phrase, this left-wing commie phrase that is used as a motto nowadays, which is globalize the Intifada, which is very scary when you think about it. It's basically a slogan, and they say that it promotes global activism and solidarity for what they would call the oppressed Palestinian people who are being oppressed by the Israeli government. And so they want to globalize this resistance, really armed resistance, violent resistance against what they would call colonizers. Now, we who know history, those of us who know biblical history, know that, in fact, this land was Israel's land far before the Jewish people's land, far before Islam even existed. So who are the real colonizers here? Who are the real oppressors? The real oppressors, of course, are Hamas. Hamas, the terrorist organization that oppresses its own people. Like almost every Muslim government in the world, by the way. Muslims in this world, I would categorize them as oppressed. They're not oppressed by so-called colonizers. They're not oppressed by the white man. They're not oppressed by the West. They are oppressed by their own governments who do not have a belief in the innate dignity of human beings that affords them inalienable rights. And if you take issue with that, just tell me which Muslim majority country you would like to move to. Which Muslim majority country do you feel is doing well? There might be a couple that are more capitalistic and are you're able to accumulate some kind of freedom and wealth there if you are a certain type of person. But like, where can you go in the Muslim world where you will see a concept of equal rights and impartial justice and due process and the dignity of women and children? Almost every, virtually every Muslim majority country, even the ones that you can think of that maybe you would like to visit, are in general extremely chaotic, especially those in the Middle East that have had Muslim rule for centuries now. They have not progressed past the point of just barbaric turmoil. There's a reason for that. It's in the ideology. It's in the belief system. Their belief system has created, in all of these Muslim majority countries, an extremely oppressive system. So for people here to be saying that they're standing up in solidarity with the Muslim people in Palestine against the Israeli occupation, that is just Jew hatred. It is, because it's ahistorical nonsense. If you really cared about the oppression of Muslim people, then you would be fighting for their so-called liberation from their own governments. You would be caring about the Chinese oppression of the Muslim minority. But you don't see that. You don't see protests about that. It's not about solidarity with Muslim people. It's not about solidarity with the Palestinian people. In this case, it really is an anti-West, anti-Israel, anti-Jew demonstration. That's what's going on here. So we'll get into more of it in just a second. Let me tell you about our first sponsor for the day. That's Carly Jean Los Angeles. The only reason I'm not wearing CJLA today is because I'm wearing my cute shirt. You're not enough, but Jesus is. But typically I am wearing my CJLA and I love it so much. This is a company, it's owned by a family who loves the Lord. They love America. They have our same values. They support incredible causes. And so you don't have to worry when you buy your clothes from Carly Jean Los Angeles about where your money might be going. They are in total alignment with the relatable audience, and they just make amazing clothes. I love all of my jeans, especially from Carly Jean Los Angeles, but their dresses, I wear them year round. It's the kind of clothing that you can wear in any season of life as well as any season of the year. It's just really adaptable. If you go to carlyjeanlosangeles.com and you use code Allie50, you'll get $50 off your order of $100 or more. carlyjeanlosangeles.com, code Allie50 for $50 off your order of $100 or more. And to just further emphasize this reality that this is largely about, I can't say exclusively about Jew hatred, because I also think it's just like a lot of groupthink and people who think that this is the progressive position, it's right to be left, and this is just like what their friends are doing. But the spirit of the movement, and certainly I think that a lot of the Muslim activists on this side are just blatantly anti-Semitic. And just to emphasize this point, many of these encampments, occupations, if you will, have specifically targeted Jewish students on campus. Many of them say that they no longer feel safe on their college campuses. And we have a video of a Jewish student at UCLA, and he is trying to get to campus. He's trying to get to his class, and there are either Muslim activists, I don't know, they're just dressed in Muslim garb, but they are blocking this Jewish student's ability to get to his class at UCLA. That's SOT 6.
We're going this way. You guys have closed the entrance. We are UCLA students. I have my ID right here. I'm being blocked off, not by the security guard, but by you two. You three. Oh, look, they're making their burger while I'm going this way. Excuse me. This is what they do. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school. And they're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance.
So this is happening all across the country. Protests have grown and become increasingly violent. University leadership has struggled to maintain any semblance of control. The University of Southern California last Thursday announced that it was canceling its main commencement ceremony after violent interactions with extremists on campus that week. That really sucks for the kids who have no part in this and just want to celebrate their graduation. If I am calculating this correctly, I'm pretty sure that this class also did not have a high school graduation because of COVID. That would have been 2020, right? Yeah. 2020, they wouldn't have had their high school graduation, and now they don't get a college graduation because they have some sick freaks on their campus doing slacktivism, and so now it's unsafe for them to have a commencement. Gosh, I mean, I hope that these students remember that in both cases, progressives have helped to ruin one of the most memorable moments of their lives. It was also revealed the USC valedictorian would not be allowed to speak during commencement following her blatant anti-Semitic speech online. I'm pretty sure that this was a Muslim valedictorian. And of course, the left was mad about this, saying that she had an awesome speech, whatever. But her speech, the Daily Wire is noting, was anti-Jew. Last Friday, Cal Poly, Humboldt, 280 miles north of San Francisco, announced that the campus would be closed until May 10th as protesters have taken over two buildings. I mean, the adults are not in charge. The adults are not in charge. Like, this is like a parent just being completely terrorized and dictated by their toddler, and just allowing their toddler to pitch a temper tantrum in the aisle of the grocery store and refusing to do anything about it, refusing to take them out, refusing to discipline the child, and just allowing the child to eat all of the donuts in the aisle before paying for them. That's like basically what is happening right now. And in a responsible scenario, the parent would do something about the child, would remove the child from the situation, would set boundaries. But in this metaphor that we're talking about, it would be like everyone in the grocery store, because this child is pitching a temper tantrum, just catering to this child's demands and making sure that no one else can use the grocery store, and that they're all unable to check out, and they're all unable to get the groceries that they need because this child is screaming on aisle 6. And so they all have to pause what they're doing. They can no longer meet their own needs because they are trying to satiate this child that no longer has self-control. That's what's happening on college campuses right now. And obviously, when you give in to the tantrums of a child, they become really bratty. They're unable to have self-control in the future. Their demands keep getting bigger and bigger, takes over your life more and more. And then you've got this awful, petulant teenager who has never learned any control, who is, again, just terrorizing your entire life. And that is what's happening with these students. These students were probably undisciplined by their parents growing up. They've learned that if I pitch a fit, I get what I want. That's what's going on here, and it's just, of course, getting worse and worse. As some universities step up their enforcement to clear out the protesting groups, whether due to political pressure and pending graduation ceremonies, NB News reported Tuesday evening that about 4 dozen encampments on college campuses remain across the country. Also on Tuesday evening, Columbia issued a shelter-in-place warning to its students as the NYPD arrived at the university late in the evening to clear the campus and arrest protesters. So Columbia is doing something. 100 protesters were arrested last night in Columbia University City College of New York. According to a law enforcement official, we have a picture of that. There is a bus where these students are being taken by the NYPD, and who knows what's going to happen to them. I'm sure they feel extremely valiant about that. I'm sure they feel like they are really, really awesome heroes. So how is this happening? Who is funding all of this? Because you'll notice that in a lot of these tent cities that are being set up on these college campuses, the tents all look the same. Obviously, they're being supplied by someone. The same thing again happened in the riots of 2020. You saw a lot of the same tools being used by these left-wing activists. That's because these organizations that are typically funded by left-wing billionaire George Soros are doing the supplying of the tools and the funding. So Soros funded Students for Justice in Palestine is one of the groups that has organized these encampments, these so-called protests. An analysis by the New York Post showed that Soros cash made its way to the students through a network of nonprofits that help obscure their contributions. Of course, SJP was expelled from Columbia University in November for threatening rhetoric and intimidation. This is an organization, again, at least in part funded by George Soros, that called the October 7th terrorist strike on Israel a, quote, historic win. Like, you'll remember that this is when Palestinian terrorists paraglided into a music festival in Israel and gang raped women and murdered all of the attendees there, or many of the attendees there. That's what happened on October 7th. Mass murder, mass terrorism in Israel, the horrific torture and killing of men, women, and children in Israel. That's what happened on October 7th. This organization, which is helping organize and fund these campus protests, called that day of terrorism a historic win. It's like, this is just like not one of those difficult things to figure out what is the right and the wrong side. And I'm not suggesting you have to agree with everything that Israel has ever done. I'm not saying that. As a Christian, my biggest concern when I'm thinking is persecuted Christians. Like, I'm thinking of the Christians in this area specifically who are also being targeted, who are also being persecuted. Like, I care about I care about the persecuted believers. And I also care, of course, about Jewish people, all innocent people, even women and children in Palestine who are being victimized and who are being endangered by all of this. I'm not saying that you have to have a black and white view of every Middle Eastern conflict, including this one. But when it comes to how this is manifesting itself here, when it comes to the spirit behind this anti-Israel, pro-Palestine movement, it is so obvious who the evil ones are. It is so incredibly obvious. Protest organizers, according to the Free Beacon, were planning this event for over a month, leveraging the support of outside activist attorneys and faculty members. Organizers at Columbia held meetings with protest organizers at Princeton and other universities to share their strategy and tips for inhibiting administrators from stopping the takeover. Also, like, this is not a group of people that are trying to hold some position or perspective of integrity. They're not trying to separate themselves at all from those who are blatantly anti-Jew and pro-terrorism. In fact, you've got protesters saying at Columbia University, no, we actually really like Hamas. We are pro-Hamas. Again, Hamas is the terrorist organization that runs Palestine, and they were voted for by the Palestinian people. So we just should note that they have the leadership that they asked for. I don't know if that support has been consistent forever, but they are there because they were put in place by the popular opinion, by the popular desire of the Palestinian people. Nevertheless, they are a terrorist organization. And here is a student activist saying, love those guys. Satu.
We are Hamas!
You're Hamas. Wow. That's a good one. You're what? You're Hamas?
Yes, we're all Hamas, eh?
Okay. We are all Hamas. Again, the terrorist organization that raped, that pillaged, that tortured, that murdered on October 7th, that is oppressing its own people. Do you know how much aid has made its way into Palestine over the years? Tons and tons of money. Why doesn't it get to the people in Palestine? Why doesn't it get to the children? Because Hamas is corrupt. They are the organization, the terrorist leadership that builds their bunkers under hospitals, under schools, because they know that Israel is going to do everything possible to avoid civilian casualties. And they don't care. Hamas doesn't care if the sick kids in the hospital or the children at the school that they get murdered. They don't care about that. They would rather them die than anyone in Hamas suffer. So unfortunately, we don't see any kind of thoughtfulness, or we don't even see any attempt, rather, to try to separate themselves from the literal terrorist organization of Hamas. In fact, we've got someone by the name of January James, who, of course, goes by he, she, they pronouns, openly stated in a live stream of an official university inquiry that Zionists don't deserve to live. And this is, again, at Columbia. This is SOT 3.5.
Why would we want people who are supporters of genocide to live? I'm confused. Zionists, along with all white supremacists, need to not exist because they actively kill and harm vulnerable people. They stop the world from progressing.
Oh, Muslims, the great champions of progress. Muslims in Muslim majority countries, the great creators and arbiters of peace. Yes, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And again, when people say Zionists, they're not being nuanced. They're just talking about Jewish people. And the vast majority of Jewish people, by the way, have a so-called Zionist perspective of Israel. Not all, but most of them do. Now, these protesters don't really have a full grasp, you might have picked up on this already, of what's going on and why they're there. In fact, at NYU, a couple students who are pro-Palestine protesters joining the rally, joining the riot, joining the encampment, they blatantly say, I have no idea why I'm here. SOT 4.
And what would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU's doing? About what? About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Palestine will be free.
I wish I was more educated. I'm not either.
I wish I was more educated. I'm not either. Really? Oh my goodness. I had no idea. I thought that you were super educated. These are people at Ivy League universities. Some of these universities, the tuition is about $100,000 a year. These are people many times, unless they got in through affirmative action, the top of their class. They had really good grades. They had good test scores. These are the people who are going to get into the best law schools, that are going to become high-powered attorneys, who are going to take very influential and important government jobs, and they will get those jobs, even though they're stupid, even though they are incompetent, because those jobs are awarded to people who are not necessarily excellent, but who are ideologically in line with the left. That's how it goes. And those people influence policy. Those people end up making decisions that trickle down to the rest of us and lead to chaos. Because again, progressivism cannot build, cannot create. It doesn't beautify, it doesn't maximize. Nothing good ever comes out of left-wing revolutions. They only destroy. And so that is why left-wing societies, why communist attempts have always failed. They've always failed because communism, leftism doesn't understand human nature. They don't understand history. They get everything wrong about how human beings work and what morality is. And that is enough to cause enough confusion and angst and anger to stir a revolution, again, to destroy something. But it is not a sufficient foundation to build anything on. And that's why you see every left-wing revolution, both here in America or whether it's in countries abroad, they always end in destruction, especially for the very people that the revolutionaries claimed they were fighting for. That is true in the Haitian Revolution. That's true in the Zimbabwean Revolution. That's true in for example, the Cambodian Communist Revolution and the Maoist Communist Revolution in China. It's just always true of these so-called liberation revolutions. They always end in violence and destruction because these godless people really have no clue. They have no clue what they're doing. And really, it's a satanic spirit that seems to be motivating them, and a desire to belong to something too. And they don't want to realize that that belonging and purpose is only found in their creator. And so they look to social justice activism to give them fulfillment. And it always ends in a great big mess. All right, we've got more to say about this. Let me go ahead and tell you about our next sponsor, 7 Weeks Coffee. All right. Get your coffee from a company that is not supporting madness like this, that is supporting godly values. In fact, they donate 10% of every sale to pregnancy centers across the country. They've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for these pro-life pregnancy centers. These pregnancy centers, as you know, we've talked about many times, they're saving lives by providing free sonograms, free resources, material, spiritual, emotional, to these moms and families in need. 7 Weeks Coffee has the very best, highest quality coffee. We love it in our home. It's great. And I just love knowing that getting 7 Weeks Coffee is saving lives. You can also subscribe to their Heartbeat Club, so you can get that coffee to your front door every month. Makes it a lot easier. You save money when you do that. Plus, when you go to 7weekscoffee.com and use code Allie, you get 10% off your order. 7weekscoffee.com, code Allie. Okay, thankfully we do have some good news going on here. We've got some Christian men who are standing up against this madness. Now, because these happen to be white, and in many cases white Christian young men, it is worth noting that these are the very people, like this is the profile of the person that the media, that the left tells you need to be most scared of. That you need to flee from this kind of person, that this kind of toxically masculine, what they would call fascist Christian nationalist, like this person that you're seeing right here, if you're watching on YouTube, like they are the ones who are a danger to society and must absolutely be shut down. Whereas all of the pro-Palestinian communists who literally chant death to America and death to Israel and kill all Zionists, those are the people who apparently, if we vote for them and the people that they vote for, they're going to save the country. Like that's what we're being sold when we say we have to when we're told that we have to vote for Democrats in order to save democracy. We have to vote for the people that represent these guys who won't even outrightly condemn these student activists. I'm not saying every Democrat believes all the things that these communist activists do on this campus, but very few of them will say anything about it. Some of them do, by the way. Ilhan Omar absolutely supports this stuff. AOC, she's not speaking out against it. If anything, she is supportive of this activism. And let's pull up that picture again because I want to describe what's going on here. This is happening at the University of North Carolina. These boys that are holding up the American flag. And here's the description of what's going on. We've got, so this is a Jewish student, Brendan Rosenblum. He is a Jewish student at UNC Chapel Hill. He had water bottles thrown at him as he stood in the middle of the quad with an Israeli flag while protesters tried to replace an American flag with a Palestinian one. UNC student Guillermo Estrada also shared his experience of protecting the American flag. So he said, "Today was a sad yet empowering day at Chapel Hill. When I walked to class, I saw the Palestinian flag raised on our quad flagpole and was immediately upset at the fact that these protesters had made. I cannot say I am fully educated on the Israel-Palestine conflict, but it upsets me that my country's flag, the American flag, was disrespected in order to advocate for another." He's absolutely right. That is such an atrocity that we would replace the flag of our country that represents the sacrifice that men and women have made on our behalf, so we have the right to freely protest, so that we have the right to free speech, the right to worship how we want to, the right to defend ourselves. These are innate rights that many, many, many people, the vast majority of people around the world, have never known. We live in the most prosperous and, in many ways, freest country in the world because of that sacrifice. That's what that flag represents. And then to raise the flag of any foreign country, but particularly a foreign country that is built on its own self-created oppression and the absolute trampling on of people's rights, it is just egregious. So he's right to be upset about this. He says, shortly after, Chancellor Roberts came with police officers to hang the flag once again. That's the American flag. And when they were met by these pro-Palestinian activists with profanity, middle fingers, thrown bottles, rocks, and water. If you feel like that about America, leave. Please leave. Like the relatable audience alone, we will raise enough money for at least a few of you to catch a flight out of here. You can go straight to Gaza if you would like, and you can be on the front lines of the liberation effort against the so-called Israeli occupation. Go there. Go to these Muslim majority countries that you believe are so wonderful. Go there. That's fine. If you hate America that much, then you should absolutely leave. When the flag was raised once again, the Greek community began singing the national anthem. As the chancellor left, the quad erupted into chaos as protesters began removing the American flag once again, preparing to destroy it. My fraternity brother and others ran over to hold it up in order for it to not touch the ground. People began throwing water bottles at us, rocks, sticks, calling us profane names. We stood for an hour. We stood for an hour defending the flag so many fight to protect. My parents started a new life in the United States, a country that has helped them flourish and raise 2 kids. I grew up in a military community and saw firsthand the sacrifices they make. I will not stand for the disrespect of these protesters. So let's put up full screen 4 again. I just want to see this picture because it's really amazing. Again, these are the people that you are told are dangerous. These young men holding up the American flag as we've got these left-wing communist pro-Palestine idiots trying to degrade, desecrate the American flag, the country that gives them the freedom to be publicly stupid. Man, what a juxtaposition. It's crazy. Something similar happened at Arizona State. Arizona State fraternities helped clean up the campus and throw away the anti-Israel protest flags and tents after the protesters were removed from the ASU quad on April 25th. This is SOT 9.
We've got the white frat boys throwing away protesters' belongings, and we've got the pigs in brown doing nothing about it, although we are being forced off campus.
Good for them. Good for them. And then we've got something else happening very similar at Columbia, Hamilton Hall at Columbia. The protesting mob was trying to break into Columbia University building on Monday night. And then a group of students stood in front of the door, tried to stop them. Rory Wilson is a Columbia senior. His dad, I think, is N.T. Wilson, I believe, who is a Christian author. And so they stood there trying to protect the building, trying to stop the anti-Israel mob on campus from seizing Hamilton Hall. They called 911, but the police never came, and they were assaulted. It's interesting because Rory, someone noted, is a history major, and he was standing there as a mob tried to reenact the 1968 protest against the Vietnam War that saw students storm the very same building. And so as we play this sod of these young men trying to protect Hamilton Hall, Rory is the tall young man, and then Charles, another young man, is the one in the glasses. SOT 7.
Blockade. Ready? Circle blockade around these three. We're going to move them out. Let's go. Another human chain. Get someone. Wrap around. Get inside. Red, back up. Red, back up by the center door. Red, back up by the center door. This isn't how you do that. Come on.
Wow, that was Megan Basham, by the way, who I saw tweeting that video and giving that commentary that I just gave you. Absolutely insane. Make sure that your children, as far as it depends on you and how you raise them and how you disciple them and the values that you instill in them, make sure that your children, if they are going to go to a godless university like this, like that they are the people who are standing up for our flag, who are standing against this absolutely degenerate nonsense. Do everything that you can to ensure that they have that courage. And I'm specifically talking to parents of young men. Good for these young men. Like, there are still remnants of masculinity. There are still remnants of responsibility. There are still remnants of patriotism and Christian values, and they manifest themselves in bravery. You see on the other side of that complete cowardice. You see them masking their faces, hiding their identity, sitting there in tents and claiming to be doing some kind of difficult work on behalf of the oppressed. It is absolutely insane. Such a perfect picture, again, of just what leftism does, what it does to the brain. It turns the brain into mush. It turns the heart into stone. It makes people stupid. It makes people morally callous. And this is a great example of what Abigail Schreier talked about on our show, that sometimes, most often, the kids who say that they are most empathetic, that they're driven by empathy, are actually the most cruel, because their empathy goes towards one direction and very often the wrong direction. And everyone on the other side of that empathy is treated with a kind of wrath and bitterness and anger, which is why empathy is not really a good guide. The Bible should be our guide to morality, and the compassion that comes from that and a desire for impartial justice is really how we should determine what our reactions should be to any conflict or any dilemma. Now, Biden, of course, our fearless leader, he has something to say to all this when he was asked by a reporter, what do you make of all of these protests? It's SOT 10.
And the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses.
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians and how they're being.
Should the Columbia University president resign?
Right this way. I didn't know that. I'll have to find out more about it.
Yeah, how they're being smash. What did he even say? I don't know if y'all saw. I was a little bit late on this. I think it was last week. He gave a speech, and I don't even know where he was. I just saw the clip, and he was obviously reading a teleprompter, as all politicians do, and he was supposed to pause, and so that the people in the crowd could say 4 more years. So obviously this was pre-planned. It wasn't a spontaneous eruption of cheers because his teleprompter said pause so they could do that. And what does he do? He says, Trump, pause. He says pause out loud instead of pausing himself. And I'm sure that his team is thinking there's only so much we can do. If we don't put pause, he won't pause. If we put pause, he'll read pause. What do we do? I feel for them a little bit. And so this was actually a good moment, I would say, for Biden. Like, this is way worse. This statement that he just made, this morally relativistic shmishmishmeh statement, is way worse than Trump's "there are good people on both sides" comment, which, by the way, in context, made a lot more sense than how people decontextualized and interpreted it after. This is much worse. This is much more egregious because it's so obvious here. They should just be able to make clear statements, but he can't because he knows that he needs the votes of those crazy people. He needs the votes of those crazy people. And also, you have videos going around of activists being like, we need food. We're hungry. It's been 12 hours and we've run out of hot dogs. Actually, they're probably not eating hot dogs here. I don't know. That's maybe the wrong example. I don't know. I don't know what they're eating. Whatever communists eat each other. They ran out. And so they're crying about food. Look, you're not a revolutionary. You're not a revolutionary. You're not brave. You're not strong if you can't even make it a few hours without DoorDash. Like, these are just the laziest, worst people. AOC says that if anyone gets hurt, if any of these students get hurt, it's going to be on the shoulders of the university leadership who should have done more, I guess, to support their students. Look, I think that yes, the university leadership, there's been a dereliction of duty, but I don't think that they should be doing anything to support these students. They should absolutely be disciplining these students. This is not just a protest. We're not just talking about free speech here. We're talking about inhibiting people from being able to graduate, stopping people from being able to go to class. We're talking about assaulting people. We're talking about vandalism. We're talking about violence. We're talking about calling for genocide. We're talking about desecrating the American flag. All of those things are worth a lot of school and legal discipline. And so you do see the police officers coming in, taking care of business in some of these places. And of course, you've got leftists on Twitter freaking out about that's somehow fascist and tyranny. Look, you getting arrested because you broke the law, you getting pushed around because you are resisting arrest is not tyranny. That's like baseline law and order. That's like the loosest form of enforcing the law that we can do. Something should have happened a lot earlier, and it should have been a lot harsher than what is happening now. So I'm not worried about infringements upon free speech happening here because that's not what's going on. It's not an infringement upon free speech. And by the way, these people don't believe in free speech. They believe in compelling you and I they believe in compelling you and me, rather, to use a man's preferred pronoun of she. And so it's not like these are champions of the First Amendment anyway. Now, Trump said what's going on at the college level, Columbia, NYU, and others is a disgrace, and it's really on Biden. He has the wrong signal. He's got the wrong tone. He doesn't know who he's backing in, and it's a mess. He is the worst president in the history of our country. I agree with that. I think that's a really astute way to say it, that it's a wrong signal. He's got the wrong tone. He doesn't know who he's backing. So true. That's the conundrum that Democrats are in right now. And it's really ugly. And it's who they are. Now, is this going to hurt them in November? Probably not. Probably not. It might hurt Biden because I actually think that there are some leftists who won't vote for him, because they don't think that he's radical enough and pro-Palestinian enough, and he's too pro-Israel. So that might be a problem. But at the end of the day, leftists still control all of these institutions and the mainstream media. They're going to spin it exactly how they want to. They're not going to allow this to affect the election. And believe it or not, like, even though the election is only in a few months, we still have a long way to go. All right. I do want to talk about just one more example of bravery. It'll be short. I'll summarize it quickly. It's not in regard to the anti-Semitic demonstrations on college campuses. It has to do with the crazy gender ideology that we are also seeing in academia, and even K through 12. But let me tell you about our next sponsor for the day, and that is Balance of Nature. Making sure you have fruits and vegetables in your diet is important for maintaining a healthy diet, but it can also be difficult, especially if you're busy. The average person doesn't even eat half of the recommended servings in a day. That's a huge gap in nutrition. That's why Balance of Nature provides the on-the-go solution. They haven't raised their prices in 10 years, which is really amazing considering inflation, considering the hard times that so many people have fallen on. Balance of Nature just doesn't raise their prices. They want to make sure it's accessible to you, and that it is affordable, that you're able to close that gap in nutrition by using Balance of Nature. You get a proprietary blend of 31 fruits and vegetables that come in easy-to-swallow capsules. They'll give your body so much nourishment, the nourishment that it needs. When you go to balanceofnature.com, you'll get 35% off plus $10 off any additional sets with your first order as preferred customer by using my code Allie. Balanceofnature.com, code Allie for 35% off. Balanceofnature.com, code Allie. Okay, guys, I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm tripping over my words today. For some reason, I'm just like not able to say what I want to on the first try. You would think with as much as I talk that it would be easy every day. Some days are, and then some days I'm like, why can I not say words? And today is one of those days for whatever reason. But I do want to talk about, if I'm physically able to, I want to talk about this awesome/sad story. I don't know. It's a good example of courage, but it's sad what happened to these girls coming out of West Virginia. So West Virginia Middle School, they were hosting a track meet, and middle school girls there protested this trans-identifying male who was set to participate in the meet. And then after that, they were actually banned from a future competition. Now, the lawsuit, I will say, so the New York Post reported that these girls are banned from the future competitions, but the lawsuit indicates that they were definitively banned from the next competition, which was last week in April 27th. But the girls did compete in a track meet on Monday, April 29th. But it was unclear if this was planned in the initial punishment or if it was a result of the lawsuit filed on the girls' behalf on April 26th. We're just not really sure about that. So I will say that. But even if the consequence is not that they were banned from all future competitions, these girls did receive backlash. Now, let me back up and tell you exactly what happened. So 5 West Virginia middle schoolers protested a so-called transgender athlete's participation in a shot put competition. Now, in West Virginia, the law bans so-called transgender girls from playing on girls' sports teams. A recent federal appeals court ruled, though, that the law couldn't lawfully be applied to this 8th grade boy who was trying to compete in the shot put competition. At an April 18th track and field meet, 5 girls from Lincoln Middle School stepped up to the circle for their turn at throwing the shot put before voluntarily forfeiting and refusing to throw in the event because they did not want to compete against this boy who goes by the name of Becky Pepper Jackson, a 13-year-old who identifies as a girl, and he's been taking puberty blocking medication and estrogen hormone therapy. But look, if he's already gone through puberty, then it doesn't matter. He already has the advantage over these girls physically. And even if he didn't, even if he had been on this hormone therapy for a long period of time, girls should not be forced to compete against boys. So here is the video of the girls going up to the shot put circle and then stepping out, forfeiting, refusing to compete against this boy at SOT 11. All right. So if you're just listening, that had no sound. So it's not supposed to have sound. That is just how the video has been circulated online. So go watch it on YouTube if you want to see what that looks like. Like, I just respect them so much. And again, like, these are the kinds of daughters that you want to raise. These are the kind of parents that you want, because these parents, I'm sure they band together. They had a conversation with their daughters and they said, look, like, you're not going to compete against this boy. That's what I'm assuming happened, that this was a parent-led resistance act. But maybe it was the girls who band together and decided to do it on their own. Either way, they were raised well, I think. That is the most likely background here, that they were raised by parents who raised them to know the truth, to stand up for the truth, even if it means self-sacrifice, even if it means giving up something that they really want. They've worked hard for this. They would have loved to compete, I'm sure. They've made sacrifices for this. However, they didn't want to compete against a boy. So again, while West Virginia law bans transgender girls, so-called, so boys, from playing on girls' sports teams, a recent federal appeals court ruled that the law couldn't lawfully be applied to this 8th grader. The court found that the West Virginia law violated Title IX when applied to this 13-year-old and pointed to the fact that he had been publicly living as a girl for more than 5 years and changed his name. The state of West Virginia, too, had issued him a birth certificate listing him as female, the judge noted. That doesn't change anything. We're so stupid as a society. And so that's why he was allowed to compete, and these girls decided to protest. And so good for these girls. Look, this is what has to happen on a wide scale. This is what has to go on. This is what has to happen in every sport. Just like Bethany Hamilton said when she sat on this couch, that if the 70% plus of girls and women who don't want to compete against boys and men stood up and said, no, I'm just not going to compete, will they be lambasted? Could they be punished? Could they lose out on scholarships and titles? Absolutely. But it would be worth it in the long run. Look, that's just what this war is. It is losing battles temporarily in order to win the war. There aren't enough transgender identifying people to have their own league. So if women just decided to bow out, then the sports would collapse. Something would have to change. I'm not saying that that's easy. I'm not saying that there is no discomfort or inconvenience or huge sacrifice involved in that. There absolutely is. But look, some sacrifices have to be made on principle, right? Like, if we can't just complain about it, you can't just say this is unfair. Like, at some point, these girls and women are going to have to protest by not participating and just take the arrows that come to them. And I'm saying that we here will stand up and share the arrows with them. It's worth that. It is worth that. So good for these young girls. Parents raised them right, courageous. They put so many grown women to shame who weren't even willing to make those sacrifices. So good for these girls. All right, last sponsor for the day is Jase Medical. It's better to be safe than sorry with our medical supply. You want to make sure that you have a year-long stash of the medications that you and your family rely on, either those prescriptions that you take on a daily basis or common antibiotics should you get a common infection and you're unable to get an antibiotic through the traditional means. You need that year-long supply stash, that emergency supply of antibiotics and medication. So go to jasemedical.com. They'll take you through their telemedicine process. You can get a year-long supply of those prescriptions and common antibiotics. It is so much better to be safe than sorry in those situations. Use code Allie at checkout for a discount. Go to jasemedical.com and use code Allie at checkout. All right, that's all we've got time for today. I'm trying to think, Bree, is there anything else that we need to let them know? Any thoughts that you have? Any commentaries? Any concerns?
I don't think I have any concerns.
You don't have any concerns?
Commentary.
Not
Nope.
a concern in the world.
Not a concern in the world.
I did love what Ron DeSantis said. Ron DeSantis tweeted about all this crazy Title IX stuff, and he's always, He's always winning. He says Florida is suing the Biden administration over its unlawful Title IX changes. Biden is abusing his constitutional authority to push an ideological agenda that harms women and girls and conflicts with the truth. We will not comply, and we will fight back against Biden's harmful agenda. I love that. We will not comply. This same mantra throughout COVID that businesses and individuals decided to stand behind when the Biden administration was trying to force them to vaccinate and force their employees to vaccinate. People said, no, I'm not going to comply. And by the way, like, we basically won that fight. Not completely. I mean, there were a lot of sacrifices made, but yeah, we moved away from all that mandatory nonsense because people refused to comply. So I love that Ron DeSantis is bringing that back. That's a good callback. We will not comply. Women should not comply. So the theme of this episode, I think, is courage. Stand up for the things that matter. Raise a respectful ruckus for the things that matter. Share the arrows with the people who are, rather than just saying, wow, I'm glad that's not me. I'm not going to wade into that fight. I'm not going to stand up. I agree with them, but I don't want to say that because I don't want to take the arrows. It's a lot more powerful when we all stand up and we say, you know what? If you're going to send arrows their way, you're going to have to send them my way too. I'm going to stand up with them. And you know what? I either agree with them or I will fight for their right to say that thing that you believe is controversial and should be silenced. We have to share the arrows, especially with our young people in school, in college campuses that are fighting this fight. Let us raise courageous and godly and kind and generous kids. We are on the right side of history. It's morally obvious, but also we just understand that good will prevail because Jesus will win. As long as we stand there, we can do everything in courage. We can do everything in hope. All right. That's all we got time for today. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Oh, let me tell you about tomorrow. I forgot. I will have Trent Horn on. Are y'all excited? All of my Catholic listeners and viewers, I'm having Trent Horn on. It's going to be a great conversation. I've got lots and lots of questions for him tomorrow. It's going to be awesome. See you guys back here then.